Welcome to Complexity Story. I'm your host, Chance Godwin. I've had the privilege of designing visual media for clients ranging from small businesses to Fortune 500 corporations. The bigger the company, the more complicated communication gets. In this podcast, we talk with business leaders to learn how they solve the problem of keeping communication clear and efficient as an organization grows. Today on episode 10, we are joined by AJ James, owner of the Algernon, a firm that provides digital marketing strategy specializing in inbound marketing. AJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Chance.
I have been looking forward to this conversation quite a bit. You have a pretty interesting background, doing a whole bunch of different things that are not necessarily directly related to the work that you do now. You come from the IT technology background, and now you're in marketing. I guess there is some overlap there. But before we get into all of that too much, I'd love for you to tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in marketing for about 10 years now. From Richmond, Virginia. Lived in Northern Virginia for about 15 years, and that's where I got into IT, mainly in the DoD world. But we moved back here back in 2005. We have family, 2 boys, a dog, and my wife, and just enjoying life down here.
Nice. So you said mainly in the DoD world, Department of Defense. What all did that encompass?
So I was an IT person, as you said, started back in the 90s, and I worked for DoD contractors. So my client base as a technology person was military, government agency, and law enforcement. And that was until 2017 when I left my last DoD contractor job to start my marketing company.
So how did you get into the IT space?
IT, because I was in Northern Virginia, and there is just tons of computer people up there. It's a popular job everywhere over the world, but especially in DoD heavy areas. So that's how I got into it.
Gotcha. Did you have a special focus in that? That's a pretty broad field.
It is broad, and so my focus was probably like the 1% people. Generally speaking, in IT, you spend your career in networking, coding, or database administration. I happened to work under a guy who was exceptional at all 3, so I learned all 3, and that took me quite blindly into a world of becoming a technology solution provider for the military and for local law enforcement, first responders, government agencies. So I had a relatively unique IT skill set that was not easy to find.
And that ultimately, I'm sure that jack of all trades has been helpful in the world of marketing as well, I would imagine.
It has been. In jack of all trades, you don't necessarily want to be that type of person, but when it comes to trying to figure out solutions to technology issues that our clients were having, it's a very good skill set to have. So it allowed me to quickly come up with solutions, or to quickly determine that it's going to be cost prohibitive or the technology area. So yes, and being an IT person is somewhat like being a marketing person. You can't just sit around and do the same thing forever. You got to always learn to stay up to date, or you'll just get lost behind. So that part of it translates, certainly.
So when you talk about creating solutions, it sounds like you're contrasting that with a more typical IT role or an IT position. What's the difference between developing solutions versus the other kind of work that's being done?
So if I was a coder, which I was for years, I would be sitting at a desk mainly coding applications for our clients. Or if I was a networker, I would be supporting a client's network or be supporting my company's network. Instead, because I understood networking, coding, and database administration and wireless communication, I was out in the field with our end users coming up with solutions to problems that they were having. So I wasn't stuck. Not that it's a bad thing being stuck at a desk all day, but I was more of a in the field type person, an operations person. So that would be the main difference there.
Gotcha. So you were actually getting to go into the environment where these solutions were being deployed and kind of do a little bit of detective work, uncovering exactly what was needed to solve those problems.
That's ultimately what led me to my last job, because when you get married and you start having children, being in the field and all over the country all the time or out of country gets to become a burden.
Yes. It's interesting how the family kind of changes the rhythm and the flow of how you work. Um, so in interacting with those particular kinds of clients, what were some of the interesting challenges that came up that you had to help them solve?
Most often it had to do with mobile communications. The more mobile you are, whether you're in the military or law enforcement, whatever, the more mobile you are, the more you're able to communicate back to your network operations center, whatever, the more you're able to do in the field. So that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, was helping them come up with solutions to make them more mobile, to be able to get technology into their hands out in the field that wasn't usually available out there. It was only available in the work environment or at a desk.
Gotcha. I have family in the military, and oftentimes they comment on how the consumer space for mobile communications moves so much faster than the military. My uncle is retired special forces, and he said that they would actually, because they had a lot of autonomy in that division, they would actually acquire a lot of their mobile technology, GPS stuff like that, from the civilian sector, just because it was so far beyond the contract stuff that was being designed for the military.
That's correct. So that probably started, to some degree. There's still many programs of records with trillions of dollars of being spent on creating things from the ground up. But years ago, the military realized, the COTS world, we need to be in it because we can get to, we don't have to spend years in development. We can go straight to market with it or in the field. So they started transitioning to as much COTS products as they could years ago. And it was kind of timely for me because that was the world that I understood.
Gotcha. So that created a lot of opportunities for you.
Indeed.
So what are some of the challenges, or how did complex communications factor into developing those solutions for your clients? Was it more communicating with the client and uncovering their needs and offering solutions, or was there some other aspect that you would say was more technical or more complicated?
Certainly that was a component of it. But it turned out that, so I was a subject matter expert, a SME, and oftentimes I was called on by our salespeople and just in general the operations department to help explain things to our end users in a way that they would understand, and not just throw technology at them and expect them to understand. And you can quickly get in over their head if they might be an expert in one, type of technology, but not all of it. We were bringing them together at, when we were giving them to a client. So I learned how to communicate succinctly and efficiently to them so that they could get the job done without making it overly complex.
It's easy when you have a deep knowledge in a subject area to struggle to prioritize what's the most important for the audience that you're speaking with. Were there any tactics, or were there any strategies that you consistently deployed to kind of filter it out what was not necessary?
I have no idea. The answer.
You just winged it. It was natural for you.
It was sort of natural. So the alternative, what I would see, guys, before I would come in and take over, being the interface for the client, oftentimes it was engineers. In one company I worked for, a gunshot detection company, there were doctor level engineers that were extremely intelligent. And when they came to try to explain things and explain systems to the end users were always overwhelmed. And it was no fault of theirs. They're telling them everything they know. But oftentimes that just creates a cloud, and it's overwhelming for the end user. So to me, it just came naturally to speak in a way that they understood.
Right. So as I'm looking at your kind of the different organizations you worked in. Was it early on? Was it more military, and then you moved more into the police force stuff, or was it kind of a mixture all throughout?
It was a mixture all throughout, mostly DoD, but with a heavy law enforcement in the middle.
What would you say is the most interesting project you worked on that is not classified?
I would say the work in the law enforcement world was probably the most intense, because we spent a lot of time in the worst areas in the country. And that was with the company I worked for that sold gunshot detection systems. So we went in the worst spots in the country. And that was the most intense. It was the most exhilarating, I would say that, no doubt. being in those environments and spending a lot of times in 911 centers. 90% of that time, it's actually very dull. So I'd usually bring my work with me and work. But when gunshot detection systems went off, then the whole place goes crazy, and it's your heart rate jumps for like an hour or two. That world was very exciting, but the travel was a lot, and it had to come to an end at some point.
So a gunshot detection system, I've never actually even heard of that. Can you explain a little bit of what's involved there?
Sure. In the civilian side of things, they use triangulations. So I was a project manager. I would hire the crews to go out and install them, and I would do the survey, the wireless survey, and the detection sensor surveys for the areas, and determine where the sensors would go on top of buildings. And they would, when a gunshot goes off, we know the GPS location of all the sensors. So when that gunshot audio hits the sensor and then hits another sensor and hits another sensor, they're able to triangulate via the speed of sound. They're able to triangulate where that shot went off, and they can put a dot on the map. The application sits there at 911, and it goes off usually during those days, probably within 8 to 15 seconds at most, and 911 could then dispatch squad cars to that area. Believe it or not, probably 90% of gunshots go unreported in those areas because they're completely used to them. I've listened to thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of gunshots probably from those systems, and they're hardly ever reported. So, the systems work great. Now they've spread out through a lot of the United States. That's the civilian side of the things. On the military side, they usually just use one sensor that has a bunch of mics on it because they're too mobile to put in a grid and expect their enemy to be in that grid. So they use a one sensor system that just points in the direction of the shooter. And usually that's a sniper. And that's all, a military unit needs is direction, and they can just bring down fire on that area. So that would be the difference between the two. I worked in the civilian world.
Gotcha. So then you transitioned from there, and what was SOI? What were you responsible for when you were with that organization?
So that company made mobile command and control gear, C2 gear, for tactical operation centers. So we were in our gear was in a lot of military shelters out in Afghanistan and Iraq and around the world. And I was brought on to help integrate technology into their existing solutions.
Gotcha. Very cool. And then you transitioned into the marketing space. Tell me a little bit about how that was for you and how you made that leap.
So when I found this company, I came across their website, and I thought they might have been out of business because the website was awful. But I called them anyway. And during the interview process, I told them, I was being interviewed as a technology integrator, but I had requested, if you ever bring me on, please, can I take over that website? Because I know coding and I can get it to where it should be looking. And when I got hired, they allowed me to do that. As I started consuming all their computer or their company presentations, their product nomenclature, their guides, their quotes, product data sheets, I realized they were all written by anybody and everybody at the company. They didn't really have anybody dedicated to marketing. So I had asked the one person where everything goes through, I said, please, before anything goes out public facing, can you send it by me so I can just rewrite it for a consistent tone and for accuracy? And at the time, I didn't know what a buyer persona was, but I did know that we were writing to high-ranking enlisted men, and then ultimately to majors and colonels who did the ultimate sign-off on the product. So I wanted to write it in a tone that they would get and they could understand. And that's kind of how I got into it. Then the next phase, probably within months of that, I just couldn't stand the look of some of the materials, like product data sheets. Again, they were done without any concern or regard to who the end user was. So I redid a product data sheet in PowerPoint at the time, and management loved it and had me do them all. And then next thing you know, they're asking me to do a catalog, which I did. I taught myself Photoshop, and just slowly over a 10-year period, I became the marketing director and got really good at it. And a lot of our competitors thought we had a big marketing team, but it was, and so I just, I really enjoyed it. So I had dual roles there. and just the marketing component was very creative, which is the opposite of IT oftentimes. So it was just a lot of fun, and it just came naturally to me.
How is if you were to describe how marketing is creative in a way that IT isn't, how would you describe that?
So I was allowed to be creative to a degree because I was coming up with solutions and integrating them. So they were new solutions, and I could pick from networking, wireless networking, coding, and database administration. So I had some creative freedom there in doing that job. But when you get into marketing, holy cow, designing product brochures, designing banners, designing catalogs, even designing business cards for the company, little things like that, I thought was a lot of fun. And a lot of the design elements, as it turned out, came naturally to me. So as I started reading more about marketing and learning about, I think it's the rule of threes, and I was like, holy cow, I know that. And I would do those kind of things, or learning about how to utilize white space. And I would look back and yes, I get that. So that all just came naturally to me. And it's a lot of fun being more creative on that side of the house. You're allowed a lot more leeway than in the IT world.
It sounds like an important component of the problem you saw that needed to be solved was that consistency across the board, to have that unified voice. Why is that so important?
When you're talking to an end user, you should be talking to them, generally speaking, in the same way that everybody else is talking to them. And it's not just the end user, it's also the contracting officer in the government world. So our competitors were DoD conglomerates and just huge hitters like Northrop Grumman, HDT Global, Lockheed, General Dynamics, you name it. We were competing against them, and we were just a small company. Our product was superior because that's all we did. But when you're selling to the government, you're not just selling to an end user, you're selling to a contracting officer. And this person has no idea what you do. What they're skilled at is understanding how the government, from the federal down to the local municipality, is allowed and lawfully to procure items from DoD contractors. So when they're looking at, say, our small company's product literature versus Northrop Grumman's, our product literature looked horrible, and our website was horrible back in the day. So oftentimes they would make a decision, well, they may have a superior product, but I'm going to go with Northrop Grumman's because even if theirs doesn't cut it, I know they have the resources in place to make it work. So that was the world we lived in. As I got better at marketing, we started winning more contracts, and we started winning back contracts that were given to other bigger DoD contractors because our marketing started to look infinitely better than those of our competitors. And that sounds crazy, but that's just how the government world works. Marketing and how you make yourself look goes a long way. So us as a very small company, I was able to help us look like a very large company, and that put the contracting officer's mind at ease when he had to select between two competitors.
Do you replicate that same technique with your clients now, your marketing clients in your current firm?
I definitely do. So it depends on the client, though, because I have some clients that are hundreds and thousands of employees, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds or, maybe over 1,000. They don't need to look big, but I also deal with small companies that do need to look big when they go against their competition. So that part comes naturally.
What are some of the key areas that you would prioritize if you're trying to make a small company look big?
Making the design look better than their competitors. And usually, if we're trying to make a small company look big, that means we're going up against bigger competitors. And I kind of compare big companies, I compare their marketing sort of with the government. We all know how the government tends to move at a slow pace because it's so large. It's inevitable. The bigger a company gets, most often in my world, the slower their marketing evolves as well. So it's not often difficult to outslick your competitors' marketing.
So if you were talking with somebody who was trying to accomplish that, I know you're one of the entry points that your clients come to you and work with you for is doing the design, the front end design of that website and getting that website looking good. Is that a high priority area?
It is. You can often just from website design alone, outdo your competitors. And of course, in the subconscious to a potential customer, they just assume that you're better or your product is better than your competitors. So certainly having a slicker website goes a long ways when you're competing in the B2B world or the B2C world.
Is there a law of diminishing returns that kicks in with that? Because I know a lot of people just sweat blood over their logo or get really obsessed with that image when they're not even really pulling together their business systems or their sales systems and things like that, which form the understructure. How do you prioritize, or how do you advise people to prioritize those things?
I think the way I am interpreting your question would be you can't wait till you think it's perfect to launch. Just go ahead and launch. But you can always be making it better. So that part never stops. Does that answer?
I like that. Yeah, no, I like that. Refine it as you go. Because yeah, they definitely, I've encountered small businesses where the aesthetic side of things is such a high priority that their business itself in delivering their solution or the quality of their service and things like that are actually suffering while they're overthinking their visual presence or their visual branding.
Yeah. So, I've been in business for 2 years now, and I was very naive in the beginning. But one of the things I learned early on was that don't let little things stop you from moving ahead. Just move ahead, and those things will get fixed in time. So a logo or a name or whatever, a design, that will come. Just start doing so that you can at least make those mistakes early on that you're going to make anyway.
Right. Right, when nobody's paying attention, when a lot less is at stake.
Good point.
So what would you say is the most complex communication problem you have to deal with now in the work that you're doing?
This is something I learned, and it had to be pointed out to me from business coaches and things that I've read. But generally speaking, oftentimes I work with marketing directors, so the communication process is simple. You say SEO, you pretty much don't have to say anything else. Or you say, let's start working on social media, you don't have to say much else. But when you're talking to an executive, or if my marketing counterparts are talking to their bosses, which are often CEOs or just salespeople, they do not get the language of marketing. So that was something I struggled with early on, was working with companies and seeing how they were doing things, and then thinking in my head, well, why would you be doing it that way when you could be doing it this way that I know of in marketing, because it's infinitely more valuable and efficient to do it this way. But they would never understand that. So I was taught that instead of speaking marketing languages, the marketing language to people who don't understand it, to speak a language that they do understand. And so for an executive, in simple terms, that's going to be revenue. What's in it for me? What do you have to offer that's, what's in it for me? And when I now am talking to people like that, I talk in terms of revenue. I talk in terms of goals. So instead of saying, I think you should be doing pay-per-click ad campaigns on search engine result pages, I say, if there are ways that we can help you reach your revenue goals more quickly, would that be something you're open to? And then the answer is always yes. And I don't have to get into the nitty gritty of it, because they often don't care. They just care that at the end of the day, they're meeting their goals more quickly than they would have without.
Yeah, one of the themes that has been coming up over and over again as I'm interviewing different people in the marketing and other communications type roles is that of empathy, and actually being able to get inside the head of the people that you're working with and that you're talking to. How do you think about when you encounter a new buying persona, maybe is a way of putting it. So maybe not your CEO or some of your typical ones, but if you're trying to be empathetic and get inside the head of a new potential client that you've never sold to before, how do you do research? How does that work for you?
So the way I start client engagements oftentimes is with a discovery phase, because I have found, I didn't realize this in the beginning a couple years ago, but now I've seen it so many times, that business owners, while they're excellent at what they do, they aren't necessarily excellent at marketing. There just isn't enough time in the day. And even if they have a marketing department, unless it's a huge company, a few people in marketing can't know everything there is to know about marketing. It's just, there's too many things. So when I talk to businesses, they'll often approach me saying, hey, we're looking to have an SEO, or we're looking to have a new website, or we're looking at pay-per-click ad campaigns. My answer generally is, okay, that may be the case, but oftentimes with clients, if we take a step back and we discuss their business goals and discuss their products and services and discuss the priorities of all these things and discuss their struggles, almost every single time I realized that they didn't need the service they came to me asking for. They needed something else that would get them to their goals more quickly. But they don't know. They're being shouted at all day long by marketing agencies wanting to sell them things. So they just don't know. So yes, I generally take a step back with my clients, talk to them, help them prioritize what's important to them. So instead of selling them what I do or selling them what they're asking me to do, I'm selling them what they need, because we've took the time to figure out where they are now and where they want to be in the future. And now we can say, hey, this is what you want to be doing. And because now we do have business goals, we're able to set up key performance indicators, KPIs, and baseline metrics now, and then baseline metrics as we move along in our marketing projects.
Do you ever get resistance or pushback when you suggest taking a step back and looking at things from a high level with a strategy mindset?
I never get resistance. It's always looked at as, holy cow, no marketing agency ever does this for us. And it seems entirely logical. Yes, this is what we want to do. I think the price point of doing that scares off some clients because they weren't expecting to engage at that price level, which is fine with me. As I try to scale up my business, that kind of works out well for me. But no, the discovery phase and the ensuing executive summary that I deliver from that is always eagerly awaited. They love it. They love the process, and they love getting the executive summary, and they can't wait to get going with the first marketed project that we do.
And as we've had conversations before, once you have that executive summary, it's a lot easier and smoother to execute the solution for them, because you have a reference point. Whenever there's confusion along the way, you've already written out that roadmap and they know what to expect and there aren't surprises.
Exactly. So now we're referencing items in their executive summary that we can start taking actionable, plans to do something with, instead of me just selling them on SEO or me just selling them on pay-per-click. I know it works to a degree, but they don't necessarily know it works. Plus, they've been sold these things so many times in the past, and oftentimes they just have average results, or oftentimes they shrug their shoulder wondering, what results do we have at all? Now, when we have an executive summary, the roadmap moving forward, they have complete buy-in into what we're doing. And the most important part is that we're baselining KPIs. So they can see this is where AJ and his company and his network are at today, and where they're getting us down the road.
I think a lot of people in the marketing space are really nervous about being accountable to those KPIs and having to actually demonstrate progress is being made. Because I guess it's because they're not super confident of their ability to deliver the solution. They know how to do a thing and they'll sell that thing. But why do you think there's a hesitation to create that transparency?
I think many agencies, most of them, they have large overhead, so they're not going to do anything that might possibly jeopardize a job. Whether that's putting an expensive discovery phase in front of a website project, or if that's, showing analytics that aren't really going to be impressed or impressive to their end user or to their client. So for them, it's just more about getting jobs. With my company, I'm worried more about the lifetime value. I could care less about getting one website job. That doesn't make or break my year. But what I love is being able to work with the client over a long-term period. And when we have that executive summary there, we start knocking things out. Once things are accomplished, then we go back and we can look at other things we can do. But yeah, putting analytics in front of a client, to me, I eagerly do that. I look forward to doing that. And ultimately, I get paid more for doing that because I'm showing them this is what we're getting. Revenue, high revenue, increasing revenue is ultimately what we want to do. There's so many more KPIs. It depends on what project you're doing. But if I'm helping them move their revenue needle, then that's way better for us than just, an invoice for a website.
In the world, in the creative side, and you do creative as well, right? You're doing you're kind of doing the full package, right?
To a degree. I'm a self-taught creative, so I'm nothing like the people over at VCU Brand Center. I have clients that are in the creative field, and they're just way above what I could ever do. Something that would take me a day to complete, they can get done in 5 minutes to an hour. So I like being creative, and I like that part of the job. But I'm heading more towards the analytical side of things and running pay-per-click ad campaigns and strategy and things like that. So to answer your question, I like doing creative stuff, but there are people out there that are better at it than I am. So it depends on the project. I sometimes will do it myself, but if it's serious enough, then I bring in people that I know who are just a lot better at it.
One of the challenges on the creative side that I experience is just a desire to do the kind of testing that you're able to do on the analytical side, and actually really figure out what the best way to design something, present something, demonstrate, the information. Because it's a little easier when you're doing smaller pieces like ads and stuff like that to do A/B testing on it, because the turnaround time to actually make adjustments and then get it out in the field and see how it performs is a little shorter. It's a shorter loop. But then when you start getting into the bigger communication pieces, I love data and I love testing, but I don't have the ability to actually do that heavy duty comparative testing in my organization. But I would love to get into a space where that's possible so that it can be more of a scientific process for delivering communication solutions. Do you know anybody who does or focuses on that kind of testing?
I do not. I don't know. I've never heard. That's a good question. I've never heard of anybody who does that, or a company that specializes. I mean, there are companies that do just data, but those are big entities. So they wouldn't work aligned. They wouldn't work parallel to us. They just do their own thing and sell their information. So, yeah, I'm not sure where a resource like that would be like that. I mean, obviously, I do that, but I do it for my projects. It's something maybe that you could always hire, and as they say, partner with somebody that doesn't do what you do. So if analytics was important to you, which it sounds like it is, hiring somebody that was good at analytics and statistics, knows Google Analytics, knows Google Data Studio, and knows how to draw data out of Facebook and Instagram and those platforms, that would be a great pairing. And that's a relationship I have with some of my creative clients. They don't want to have anything to do with the analytics side of the house, but they're on retainer with other companies, and those companies, those executives, always want to know what's the data. So I've had some good relationships with them forming, just because they do the creative so well, and I handle the analytics so well.
It's a match made in heaven when you can get it working. One of the challenges with doing the analytics on the creative itself is there are just so many variables to test against to know what's moving the needle and what's not moving the needle is a little bit tricky.
I think with the uber creatives in the world, they know what works and what doesn't. So I can rely on them to come up with design that's the latest and greatest. So I think as long as you're keeping your pulse on the creative side of the world, I think you're fine. And then as far as testing on the other platforms, like you said earlier, yeah, ads are easy to test. For somebody like me, that's a lot easier because you can throw a bunch out there and see what sticks and see what doesn't, and then you just turn off the ones that aren't working, and all the spend goes to the ones that are working. So on my side of the house, that's easy. For the creative side, I just lean on those people that are really good at it to come up with what's best.
So here's a question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where the complexity of the communication created a funny miscommunication or created Yeah. Any funny situations ever arise because communication got complicated?
Okay, so I wouldn't say funny. Serious would certainly be a way to explain it. So when I was back in the military and law enforcement world, certainly, um, being a technology person, oftentimes companies are pushing to get their technology into the field and get it purchased by clients. And sometimes they push too hard and the technology may not be what they sold it as. It's close, but then people like me would have to have a conversation with chiefs of police or colonels who have bosses that are asking, why isn't this working now? So yeah, those were challenging communication issues that I had to go through, and some of my coworkers and superiors had to go through. Ultimately, we learned that if you have a plan in place, they're fine with it. And we always did. We always entered into those conversations with, this is where we are right now, and we're owning up to that. But this is our plan to get out of it.
Yeah, I can see where if you came to them and said, sorry, you just have to deal with it, that wouldn't go over so well.
Correct.
But yeah, so knowing a way forward. What is a big idea that you would like to see more people embrace that you think would improve the world, maybe even just in a small way?
I think this may be completely out of left field, but one thing that I learned to embrace about a year ago is just networking and getting to know people. So many people just live in their bubble and don't get outside of that. And for many, that's fine. That's their comfort zone. But when you start getting outside your comfort zone, you start realizing what can be. One component of that is networking and meeting people. And since I've been doing that, the amount of business associates I have and the amount of friends I have has skyrocketed. And that's something I wish I had done since day one when I left my 9 to 5 was networking. But this past year has been incredible. So I think people should just get out and meet other people. And it doesn't matter if they're like you or unlike you. The more people you know, the more beneficial it is to you and your family and your circle of friends.
Do you think that that attitude of positivity towards networking and getting out there and meeting people is something that fewer people do today and maybe was more common in the past before, digital communication got so big? Or has it kind of always been something you think people struggle with?
Well, I think it's something that always people had struggled with, whether or not it's done more now versus in the past. I would say just because of, I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups, or I follow certain Instagram groups or other social media groups. So I communicate with people all over the world now. So to a degree, it's much greater than it was in the past. And I get answers from people across the world. And I've had people across the world help me figure out things, in the groups or on phone calls. So certainly I think it's scaled out quite large now. But yeah, it can be of such benefit to people if they just realize what was out there.
Are you working on any exciting projects that you want people to know about right now?
Let's see. I think they're all exciting. Holy cow. They all have a unique thing. Some parts of work aren't as exciting as other, but I think, gosh, I love running pay-per-click ad campaigns. I just think it's so much fun. It seems like it wouldn't be, but it is a lot of fun. I like whether it's on search engine result pages, SERPs, or if it's in Facebook, Instagram, whatever social platform. I love growing my clients' social following. I love growing their reach. And at the end of the day, I love growing their revenue. So those types of projects to me are very exciting. I do really enjoy building websites. I like doing that because they're always well received. It's like making a very nice dinner for somebody and enjoying all of the compliments you get after it. But I think, the pay-per-click world, the ad world is just a little more exciting. At least it is for me.
Nice. Any clients that you're working with right now that people should check out?
I would say, let's see, some of the clients that people should check out. Commonwealth Commercial Partners is a big client. They do a lot of great things, not only in their world, but for the community. Work Labs, Cabell Harris, that's a great company that I get to work with. I'm very fortunate to do that. So many, man, there's just so many. I would have to bring up my client list. So
yeah, that's cool. That's good. Where can people get in touch with you or see your work?
certainly on my website at thealgernon.com, TheAlgernon. And you can see my work there. I try to update it as much as I can. Social media for myself, I wasn't as much into just because I was so busy, but that's a lame excuse. If I'm selling that type of thing, I need to be in it. So my social platforms, Facebook and Instagram, are starting to build up. I'm starting to do that for myself now. So they can see work there, or oftentimes just my insight you can find there, more so than on my website. And of course, I get out and about. So
face to face.
New people. Right.
Very nice. All right. One final question for you before we wrap up today. Who would you nominate to be somebody who would enjoy getting on this podcast and talking about nerdy communication stuff?
I think Joe Alexander would be a good guy. He's an exceptional copywriter. I would say Cavill Harris, although his time is very limited. But if you allow me more time, I will think of some people.
Sounds great.
Get them to you.
Yeah. I appreciate you joining us today. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Chance. I appreciate it.
This podcast is produced and sponsored by Godwin Media. If you'd like to use visual media to spend less time on repetitive communication and more time earning revenue, visit www.godwin.media to find out how. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. Search for Complexity Story. You can learn more about today's guest in the show notes below. If you'd like to nominate someone for the show, or you'd like to join yourself as a guest, please email me at podcast@chancegodwin.com.